Greetings, this is Glenda, prayer chaplain and prayer chaplain trainer for Up Church. As we continue our month of wisdom, let us focus on the wisdom of the universe that we live in. We live on a world, and so we want to take care of the world that we live in. But we have to remember that this wonderful, wonderful ball that we live in is part of an expansive and magnificent universe. Let us focus on the wisdom it takes for us to be divine, universal creations. James Weldon Johnson wrote in his poem, The Creation, "And God stepped out on space, and he looked around and said, 'I'm lonely. I'll make me a world.' As far as the eye of God could see, darkness covered everything, blacker than 100 midnights, down in a cypress swamp. Then God smiled, and the light broke, and the darkness rolled up on one side, and the light stood shining on the other. And God said, 'That's good.' Then God reached out and took the light in his hands, and God rolled the light around in his hands until he made the sun. And he set that sun ablazing in the heavens. And the light that was left from making the sun, God gathered it up in a shining ball and flung it against the darkness, spangling the night with the moon and stars. Then down between the darkness and the light, he hurled the world, and God said, 'That's good.' Then God himself stepped down, and the sun was on his right hand, and the moon was on his left. The stars were clustered about his head, and the earth was under his feet. And God walked, and where he trod, his footsteps hollowed out the valleys and bulged the mountains up. Then he stopped and looked and saw that the earth was hot and barren. So God stepped over the edge of the world, and he spat out the 7 seas. He batted his eyes, and the lightning flashed. He clapped his hands, and the thunder rolled. And the waters above the earth came down. The cooling waters came down. Then the green grass sprouted, and the little red flowers blossomed. The pine trees pointed his finger to the sky, and the oak spread out his arms. The lakes cuddled down in the hollows of the ground, and the rivers ran down to the sea. And God smiled, and the rainbow appeared and curled itself around his shoulders. Then God raised his arm, and he waved his hand over the sea and over the land, and he said, bring forth. And quicker than God could drop his hand, fishes and fowls and beasts and birds swam the rivers and the seas, roamed the forests and the woods, and split the air with their wings. And God said, 'That's good.' Then God walked around, and God looked around on all he had made. He looked at his sun, and he looked at his moon. He looked and smiled at his little stars. He looked on his world with all its living things, and God said, 'I'm lonely still.' Then God sat down on the side of a hill where he could think. By a deep, wide river he sat down. With his head in his hands, God thought and thought. He thought till he said, 'I'll make me a man.' Up from the bed of the river, God scooped up the clay, and by the bank of the river, he kneeled down. And there the great Almighty, who lit the sun and fixed it in the sky, who flung the stars to the most far corner of the night, who rounded the earth in the middle of his hands, this great God, like a mammy bending over her baby, kneeled down in the dust, toiling over a lump of clay. He shaped it in his own image. Then he blew the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Amen.